Alrighty, we are in the last moments of this, and sure everybody is ready for the after party, but we're going to give you a little bit of woo from the customer side of things. Do the woo, you know. Okay. So, I've talked to hundreds, if not thousands of people that have basically worked with developers and agencies. They always came to me afterwards. So I've heard the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I thought it would be good to talk to Todd a little bit about what I see, because I've heard a lot in the last 2 days about education, working with clients, what we should do, but I think sometimes the communication isn't quite clear. So we're going to start with Gutenberg and Jetpack. No, we only have 20 minutes. I'm not talking about that. We are actually going to talk about extensions. And Todd, here's the deal. We think we explain it right. We know what WooCommerce Core is. We know what extensions do. But I swear to God that people still don't get it. All they look at is your customer looks at, typically, you are nickel and diming me again. So how can we, as developers, make that a clear message where people, okay, they trust you and they take it and run with it?
Sure. So there's sort of two parts of that, right? One of them is sort of building trust with people around, this is supposed to be free software. How come I keep having to dole out more and more things for stuff, right? That's sort of a question there. And then part of that, I think, folks who understand how WordPress works understand that there are such things as plugins and themes, and that WordPress is a platform that you have to add things to make it exactly what you want it to be. And WooCommerce is the same way. And so this whole concept of extensions and themes and things you're adding in is not always straightforward. So I guess I would say, well, there's a few things, right? So there's a lot of folks here that build sites for people that I think actually you have a trust relationship with your client already. And so if they trust you and you're doing a good job for them, then as sort of like Becca said this morning, right? You don't have to worry about it, right? You're taking care of all of it for them. You've made their lives pretty easy. They feel like they're covering you. If I'm taking what you said about people working with a developer and maybe it goes okay, but then they've come to you, like that means that they're moving on to someone else to help them and they're trying to make sense of what they've ended up with. Like somebody was doing this for me and now I've got this thing and there's all these plugins and there's all these little red dots and there's these messages showing up and I don't know how to make any sense of it. I think that all of that is a symptom of this challenge that we have generally, which is I talked about it before, that store owners and store builders are just, really different people. And we've been trying to make the store owners, I don't know that there's that much education you can give to somebody who wants to run their store if they don't really care to understand about how WordPress works. So I think there's two things. One is you take what Becca talked about this morning, which is that you try to be a full service shop. You try to help take it on as a service for them. Be the human face. The other thing that I would say we're trying to do, which might be helpful for all of you, is to actually recognize that you want to give your store owners a good store owner experience. And so part of what you should be thinking about is not just, can I put some stuff together that makes what they're asking for possible? Like, can I get their site built and launched? But can I guarantee them they're going to have a good experience running their store afterwards, right? Can I, can I set them up in such a way that really what they're getting after it's built is going to be something that will make sense to them? And I guess the point I'm going to make there is, like, currently I think that's very hard for people. I think the WP admin experience is not really made for non-technical people, and so I think I'll say Becca's point again is that often the best thing you can do is not get people to have to interact with that a lot, or give them a very simple sense of where they're at. Like, don't have them understand. Why do they need to understand extensions? if you set it up for them, right? And you can organize it. And then I think this is also a statement about to our extension developers and also to those who are contributing to WooCommerce Core, not just the folks at Automatic, but that 613 or 14 contributors, that we need to start thinking a whole lot about what that store management experience is, and maybe thinking about how we separate the complexity of setup and settings and admin from a very simple store management experience, right? So the answer I'm giving you is that I think where we are right now is we sort of have to take ourselves and put ourselves kind of like stand out in front of it for people and be of service to them. And at the same time, those of us who are actually doing the development on the platform and the extensions need to really start considering that the needs of the builders and the owners are different, and actually start taking that into account as we begin to evolve our extensions and evolve the way that WooCommerce Core gets used. I don't know if that's a really I just want to acknowledge that there's not a straightforward answer right now. But the nice thing about open source is we all can contribute to making a better experience for those non-technical store owners. But we have to actually be willing to do it. And it's a little bit hard, right? It's hard to see how we're going to get there way there and make, are we going to make WP admin, I don't know, feel like Squarespace or Shopify, right? Are we going to do that? I think we could actually get to an experience that's like that for our store owners, but we're going to do it incrementally in pieces as long as we really have it as our sort of North Star to get there. Okay. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
We're committed to that for sure at Automatic. You'll start to see it in lots of the things we're trying to do. The WooCommerce team at Automatic is trying really hard to do that and to empower all the devs out there to be able to do that, right? So you worry about building it, and then you can feel very confident that the store running experience is going to be pretty straightforward and simple and really focused on just what store owners want to do.
Okay. Now, depending on the person's needs, of course, there's a lot of variables here. We talk about educating your customers a lot. We throw that out. You're talking to somebody that's been doing it for 7 years, educating. And I think we misunderstand what education is about. Education doesn't necessarily mean a long-winded explanation. It may be a simple sentence or two. So I want you to kind of think of these 3 scenarios and give me your thoughts on it. Okay. So we have the person that says, hey, we're going to educate something. We're going to educate you about something. So you give them information. Well, it's end up being way too much information. So you've overeducated them, and now knowledge is dangerous. Now you're hoping that that next step, or the step that you can avoid, is that they say, you take care of it for me. You need PHP 7. They don't say why. Explain this why. They just say, okay, and that's it. And you take care of it. You built that trust, which has been talked about a lot. So we have those 2. And then we have the third thing, do we scare the hell out of them? And that is where we're saying, if you don't keep your site backed up, if you don't keep your site maintained, the vortex of hell is going to open up. You're going to be sucked into it. Your business is going to be sucked into it. You're never going to survive. And that's what we use a lot too. So there's all these gray areas. You as developers, how do you decide, or how do they decide when they're working with a client, how much education to give them? Or is it more a matter of building trust and staying totally away from giving the threatening, your site's going to crash and burn?
Yeah, it's sort of the first thing that occurs to me is, like, I usually think of when you're talking about building something for somebody, if your approach to solving the problems with the system you're building is education, right? If it's like the RTFM, right? You probably are already on a road to failure, right? Like if you've built a thing that someone really, really needs to read a manual that you need to spend a lot of time educating about, it's probably better to rethink how you're providing that service or product, right? I know that sounds like a funny thing to say, right? Because so my suggestion is that the way our clients should have a good experience. People who want, so they're either going to get that great experience from you, or they're going to get it from the product itself. I don't tend to think that fear is the right way to get somebody to do the right thing, right? Like, I always like to say, like, everybody here has heard that if they don't eat their vegetables and get some exercise, then they're not going to live as long and it's not going to go very well for them. But how many people here really eat their vegetables and get all the exercise they're supposed to get? Right? Yes, I know some of you do, but most people don't. And that's because really it's hard to motivate people with fear. So I'm actually a fan of we need to make it so that educating people about how to navigate WordPress or how to navigate e-commerce complexities is not necessarily the right approach. I think we should be looking at ways that we can actually just help them, right? And the nice thing about that, I think, honestly, is that if we're making the products better, so you don't need to be somebody doesn't need to be educated to use it, like you don't need like a manual like this, WordPress for Dummies, just to get through, just in order to run your store. I think that benefits everybody who's building sites in the sense that that's just stuff you don't have to worry about, right? It makes it easier for you as a site builder. It also means you get to concentrate on things that are actually more high value. You're working on the customization of their site, helping them build interesting and unique features for their site, which is stuff that's going to always be higher value. You'll probably get paid more for it. They will get more value out of it. They will understand the value there, rather than saying, you know, you're spending your time with all these little nitty-gritty things. So my answer to that would be, I think educating your clients and users is not the place to start, right? You know what I mean? It's like that's almost like you're almost failing by the time you've gotten to that, you're kind of walking down the wrong path.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about onboarding, because we've been talking about it a lot, and you've already shared in your keynote, and everybody knows it's updated WooCommerce, that you've touched on some of the pain points already. Kind of a two-part thing. What can we foresee as the next pain points being touched, if you can tell us? And secondly, what about those pain points beyond the realm of WooCommerce, such as marketing, social, all the things that really are going to make their store succeed? How can the developer, if they don't offer that services, how can they prepare themselves to help prepare their clients for those other pain points they're going to experience?
Yeah, sure. So onboarding is our first thing. We're going to continue working on that. You've seen some of our first steps at that. That's just helping non-technical people just get up and running. The next thing that, again, this is another shout out for our designers, because they've been really jumping out ahead. The other thing we're working on, which I would really love to get all of us working on, is rethinking the basics of how you set up and manage a store. And I use the word basics there. Like, there's always going to be the advantage of WooCommerce and WordPress are that you can customize it and it's flexible. There's always you're always going to be doing some customization there. But for the basics, you know, entering products, setting up product variations, you know, taking orders, fulfilling orders, going through and figuring out what's the status of your various orders, that sort of thing. We're very focused on trying to make that a much more, making that look and feel more like an encapsulated experience, just focused on non-technical things. Like, so it's sort of like right now, it's like we're building a car for someone and they sit down in the seat, but it doesn't have any of the metal body, and so they're just looking at the engine and the wires and the tubes and everything at the same time while they're driving it, and it's incredibly distracting while they're trying to figure out how to drive, because they see all this stuff spinning around, and like, you know, what we'd really like to do is to start to try to actually cover all that stuff up with the body, so that when you're driving the car, you just concentrate on the things that you really need to do when you're driving your car. So you just need to concentrate on the pieces that you need when you're running your store. So I think one of the things we're going to start to see is looking for ways that we can cordon off those things in the WooCommerce experience, so that we don't have to force people to be educated. And in a way, it also makes things easier for developers, because I was having a conversation earlier about the onboarding wizard that we put together, and several people were kind of like, these are very experienced WooCommerce developers were saying, this is really annoying, all these things that I have to do. I have a way that I want to set up most of my WooCommerce sites already, and I don't need to go through this wizard because it only lets me do 50% of the things I actually want to set up. I'd much rather just install the basic thing and go through all of the admin settings and just do them the way I want, right? And what I said was, I was like, well, the onboarding wizard is actually not for you, so it's okay that you don't like it, right? No, the point is there, because that's true, because I actually think you need a different experience for someone who's a really accomplished WooCommerce developer. We've talked about it might be better to actually find an easy way for someone to just have two paths to setting it up, right? One of them is we walk you through the basics and we help you get all this stuff set up, which is what our onboarding wizard's been like, non-technical folks. But then the other one's like, maybe it's just like we start helping you set up like basic config files so that you install WooCommerce, and 90% of the settings are exactly the way you always want them to be, or it's just one long sheet and like you can do all the checkboxes that you want all at one time, because that's a much quicker way for someone who knows all the bells and whistles to set or organize something. I'm thinking off the cuff. I'm not telling you what we're like. I don't have this thing planned or designed, but this is the sort of thing we're talking about a lot, because it's so clear that we can't keep forcing different people into the same paths. So that if you want to know what I think you're going to start to see is this is something I would like to encourage all of us to start figuring out how we can do. Because I think it is the key. It is the key to helping WooCommerce grow and to let more people use it, is to lower the barrier of entry for non-technical people, but then at the same time improve the lives of developers, right? Because the developers, one of the problems with some of the WP admin experience that we have right now for WooCommerce is that it's actually not as quick for the developers either, because we had to make certain parts of it work well for a store owner, right? We could potentially actually really, really improve the situation for both if we acknowledge that their needs are slightly different and start to set those UXs to actually focus on the real needs of those different roles. Cool. So I think you'll start to see that sort of thing a lot from us. Yeah. And then I'll just be honest with you, just because you mentioned Gutenberg and stuff. It's like I think we're really starting to explore how we can bring a more modern kind of web application type experience into WooCommerce. So exploring opportunities to use React and JavaScript so that we have richer experiences. Like we're starting to play around with that sort of stuff and look for it as well. We're trying to do that in a way that is not going to alienate or cause problems for our extensions that are all built in PHP. But I think that we should all start trying to move in that direction, because it's the kind of experience that most people who use modern web applications expect. And I think WordPress and WooCommerce are completely capable of doing it. It's just approaching the front end in a different way. So I think we should all be starting to do that. And if you ask what you're going to see, I think we're exploring that a lot, because it just seems like the right thing to do. Gutenberg's a good example of how to do that with basic layout and sort of theming. But there's a lot of there's a large discussion going on about what's the JavaScript framework we're going to use in WordPress core. It's pretty clear we're going JavaScript at some point, and so trying to help us move that way so that we can bring that rich experience to our users sooner, especially the store owners. Because they're more like a regular consumer, and that's what they're getting from all their other web experiences. And we want to make sure that they feel like it's sort of like we want WooCommerce to look and feel like it's as good and powerful and scalable as it is. We don't want it to look like I have friends. I always use cars because I have friends that are really into cars. But like I've got a friend that's got the most like souped up old BMW, but and like he can race almost anybody, but that car looks like pretty beat up because he's just been working on it for years, And everybody looks at it as like, I think that thing's going to fall apart. I don't expect that thing can outrace me. And if they don't expect it, they maybe not even give you the chance. And so I think that's one of the challenges we have right now too, is trying to help our store owners.
So the last 2 minutes, let's see what Todd is as an online shopper, because every one of you might have a shop or work with a shop or build a shop. Todd, when you go online and you're shopping and you get on an online store, what really pisses you off?
Oh man.
What's the one thing that just drives you insane?
So slow stuff really drives me insane. I'm just being honest. And this is a performance theme, especially some this morning. Like that, it really pisses me off because I know that it's usually just somebody being lazy. Like that something's going to take a minute to load. I'll tell you, I'm incredibly impatient for those kinds of things. What else pisses me off? I don't get pissed off very easily, so it's like
you're.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It sounds so disappointing. It's not very dramatic. I also I think that there is. This could sound a little philosophical, but I'm concerned. Pissed off is the wrong word, but I am often concerned if I'm trying to buy something. I'm concerned. Even though it's convenient, like everything, I always want to start at Amazon because it's so easy. I'm really concerned about the sort of homogenization of the way that we have commerce online. That there's like these like cookie cutter experiences where you lose that connection to the people who run those businesses or who make those things, and you just go to this kind of like one place that has no personal kind of connection to the people who are making the thing. I think that that's actually I have a tendency to want to look for places to buy things from that are that feel like they were made by a person and maybe a small set of people as opposed to thousands and thousands of people, because I feel like the web has always been a place where we have lots of diversity, and I worry oftentimes when we lose that, even for convenience.
Yeah, okay.
That's actually one of the things I think about a lot.
Does everybody want to know what the head of WooCommerce would never buy online? Real quick.
What was it somebody was talking about in the secret room? A wife? Apparently you can buy a wife online, a used wife. I know, it's horrible, isn't it? There was a horrible, horrible thing that I heard, but I would never do that, just so you know.
All right.
I would never, ever do that.
Well, thank you, Todd. That's
sure.
interesting.
Thanks, Bob.
Very interesting. Thank you.